Hello, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today we're on day 4 of By the Well for God's Witness to the Wonder. Now on day 4, we're talking specifically about how God uses flawed vessels in his lineage and Tamar and Rahab. We read in 2 Corinthians 4:7, "We have this treasure in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us." And Judy sums that up and says, God uses flawed vessels to display his awesome power and to glorify himself. So here I've used one of the bird houses from the stamp set Home for the Holidays, and I stamped that on some craft heavy stock paper, and then I'm using some of my Daniel Smith watercolors that I got from the By the Well for God shop, and I'm just going to color that in. I want a bunch of browns. I'm kind of making this to look more like a wonky cabin rather than a birdhouse, so that's kind of my thought process as I create this. Now, what I really like about clear embossing is that when you use watercolors or distress oxides as watercolors, it helps you keep in the lines because you have that raised black edge. And also even just for pencils, if you're coloring in with colored pencils, it's super helpful, and it also helps make the stamp stand out since you have that glossy black line instead of just a flat black look. So why I'm adding multiple layers on this house is to add depth to it and also to make it look like real wood grain, because you know that wood is not going to be all the same color. So by adding in different layers of different browns, it does help give that look. Once this is all painted in nicely, I am going to grab my General's charcoal white pencil. This is like a super nice pigmented white colored pencil, and I'm going into all the windows and stuff and adding that white in there. It really makes it pop. And I'm also going to color in the roofs. I have a plan for them, but I want them to be white in the background. I do have to say, when you're using embossing powder, make sure to use an anti-static tool to get that static off the paper before you emboss, because you don't want heated embossing powder in places where you don't want it. It made it a little tricky. I did have a little extra on the roof line, and it made it just a little bit harder to color in. So now I am cutting this out because we're going to move on to the next step, which is going to be making snow on these roofs. So I'm using grit paste here, and honestly my grit paste dried super fast. I got this maybe 2 months ago or something like that, and it has dried out very fast compared to everything else I've used. I've never had any trouble with my texture paste or anything, so I didn't really think that I needed that cling wrap, saran wrap tool where you press it down into the texture or grit paste, but now I know. So now I'm definitely going to be ordering a new grit paste and using that saran wrap little trick. But what I am doing here is just adding some grit paste and then some of that clear rock candy glitter to make it look like snow. I love the look it gave, but it should have been easier than this. I was basically molding it with my hands because it was so dried out. So now that my house is done, it's time to work on the card. Now, before I started this study, I actually grouped all my ephemera pieces that were specific for each day and scripture cards and put them all together. So I have 24 little bundles for each day. So I know what cards I can use for that day. And this was one of the scripture cards for day 4, and I decided to use the back side of the scripture card because I had just done a pink card. So this was a way to use that card still, and I liked the background of it, and it matched the plaid that I was already working for with that free printable pocket. If you haven't picked up the free printables over at the shop, go ahead and do so. It's just at By the Well for God's shop. You do not have to purchase anything extra. You don't even have to purchase the kit. But what I am doing is I am using some of them as pockets like they come, but I'm also using them for tabs or cutting them out to use the ephemera pieces. So those are some different ideas to use the pockets. Now this is one of the library cards that was part of the purchased printables available with the kit, and I am adding some ink to the back side of it because it was printed at UPS and they have really stark white paper, which is awesome, but I didn't want that shown on the back side. I also am using my Barely Arts precision glue to glue down this pocket. Now with this glue, all I have to do is hold it down for a second and it hardens pretty fast. I'm moving on to the front side of this card and making sure that that grit paste is actually staying on the house. And I had this music book sent to me by Anne Marie, and I love it because it doesn't have any words, so it's not going to be distracting as much. And I am using it in the background of this card to break up the plaid. Now, since we have the back side of this card distressed, I'm going to make sure that everything on the front side is distressed as well. I've already distressed the music note paper, but I haven't done the edges of this card. So I wanted to make sure to get that done before I forgot about it, and also added that house because that would have made it difficult to distress all the edges. I also knew I needed something on the left-hand side of the front of this card. So I grabbed these labels and I send it through my typewriter and write flawed vessels and then the verse 2 Corinthians 4:7, and I am just using half of it, and like always I add it to some white cardstock before I glue it on. That helps it be not as see-through because sometimes you'll be able to see a little bit of the lines behind it, so that is my little trick for that. And then I'm going to add some foam tape to this house to make it pop off the page a little bit, and then the front side of this card will be done and we'll move on to the rest of the back side. Now I did have a little issue with this library pocket card. I didn't like how it stood up past the card, the main card, and so I didn't like how you could see that from the front side. So all I'm going to do is snip off some of the bottom and then around those corners again, and then you won't be able to see it. It'll kind of lay low behind the card. I also want to make a little tab pull though, and so I grab this velvet trim ribbon and I'll just staple that to the card, and then this whole thing will be done. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I will link everything I used down below. You can follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. And if you haven't seen day 3's video, I will link that next. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.